set? All right. Well, welcome everyone to this special City Council work session for October 4th, 2021. Ashley, would you call the roll?
Cummins.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Dora.
Here.
Manetza.
Here. Our first item on our work session agenda is an economic development update with Elizabeth Butler.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here tonight to give you an update on the City of Grand Haven's economic development efforts. Okay, tonight I'm just going to share with you some of the top issues that our employers are facing. So in the City of Grand Haven, these are our top employers. We have SHAPE, the schools, North Ottawa, Automatic Spring, Grand Haven Stamped, Myers, Jost, West Michigan Molding, Ramey, and Engine Power. So of the 7,400 jobs in our area, our top 10 employers are employ about 65% of the jobs. Okay, and it's important to note that out of the top 10, 7 are manufacturers. So it's very important. The city has nearly 1,200 establishments. But most of them only have between 1 and 4 employees. So that's about 60% of the businesses here only have between 1 and 4 employees. So when we consider economic development of a region, it is important to help those small businesses grow. But equally as important is to help those help retain our top employers of the region. Using round numbers, we have just north of 11,000 residents in the city, and of those residents, of those 11,000, 5,600 are eligible workforce. So only 900 of those residents actually live and work in the City of Grand Haven, so very small, a small percentage. So most of the 5,600 residents that are eligible to work actually go and work elsewhere. So we've identified, we've kind of laid out who our top employers are, and then where our workers, the people who are working here in the City of Grand Haven, are actually non-city residents. That's one piece of it. So the other piece of it is I want to talk about the challenges, the top challenges our businesses are facing. One is finding talent, affordable transportation to and from Muskegon County, affordable housing, and lack of industrial land. And I don't think this is new to anybody here, but I want to go through them in just a little bit more detail. So it seems like wherever you go, there's a help wanted sign and there's reduced hours, right? There's overtime in factories to get product out the door, and there's a small wage war going on to get workers in the door to work. There has not been a magic solution, but some of these issues is what our employers are facing. So the $300 kicker is now gone, but that was definitely an issue that our employers were fighting against. The child tax care credit, so that individuals can get are getting right now $250 a month into their bank accounts per child. There's mortgage assistance programs. There's baby boomers. They're exiting the workforce. And in the same note, the younger generation coming up, there's less of them, so it's not an equal one out, one in. There's less coming up than there are going out. And also, we're seeing now that prime age men are actually switching to part-time. So there's the whole mix of things that are going on right now in the workforce. So we have been working with the area businesses to help give them training dollars through grants to help them upskill their workforce. In fact, the Going Pro Talent Fund was just, those applications just went live with the state of Michigan last Friday, I believe. And this area is very good at claiming some of those grant dollars to help out. So our manufacturers, they are drawing a lot of employees from Muskegon County. And then although Muskegon has MATS and we have Harbor Transit, there's no one solution that can go across that magical county line. And so for our larger employers, about 70 to 75% of the production workforce is actually coming from Muskegon County. So it is significant. So I did a study in 2019 to help confirm this data, and I plan on refreshing that soon here coming up this fall. But it is an issue, and so we are at the table with some other. We're at the table where the discussions are happening on how to find a solution for this issue for our companies. You should be able to live where you work. So as we talked about earlier, the 7,400 jobs, 6,500 of them are being filled by people who don't even work in they don't even live in the city. So according to Ryan Kilpatrick from Housing Next, I got this data from him, the need for rental workforce housing is up 400% over 3 years ago. And so that's a jump from 65 units to 315 units that are needed. And this is for Northwest Ottawa County, not just the city of Grand Haven. He kind of aggregates his data. Additionally, the homes that are for sale, the workforce housing between the ranges of 150,000 to 250,000, that's up nearly 91% in the past 3 years. So the need for affordable housing is definitely out there, and it would be helpful for our businesses to find solutions for this. So, manufacturing. We have 46 manufacturers in the city of Grand Haven. It's our top industry, and meaning that they are paying most of the paychecks, and they are recycling that spending within our community, okay? Our manufacturers have a global footprint. We have ties to France, Belgium, Mexico, China, Japan, India, France and Germany, just to name a few countries. And then also our manufacturers are shipping to numerous continents across the world, okay? So, and we have manufacturers in our town that have ties to other places in the other communities in the United States, whether it's a Michigan city or a state like Tennessee, California, Alabama, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas, right? Those just to name a few. We have a large reach. Shape is our largest employer, and when you look at their website, one of the things they put out there is act local, be global. We want all of our manufacturers to continue to be plugged into our local economy. So it's important for us to remember the ties that our manufacturers have with other cities, states, and countries. That being said, when they're preparing their strategic plans for future growth, we need to have options for them here. And right now, we don't. I am actively working with some manufacturers who need to expand, but standard options in our community just aren't there. For example, there's a business here who just was awarded a big contract, and they're in a 20,000 square foot sublease in the city of Grand Haven, and they need to upgrade to a 50,000 square foot lease. We don't have anything for them, okay? So they want to stay in the Grand Haven, Muskegon, Holland range. Since I don't have anything to present to them, they're talking with Muskegon and Holland because they do. So these conversations are going on right now. I have to bring the conversation back to the airport land, the land surrounding the airport. This land is right in the heart of our industrial park, and right now it serves very few. After the council meeting last June around the airport, those manufacturers have now heard they can't grow here, and this option is not available. As they're preparing their strategic plans for the future, they may just gravitate towards one of those other communities that they have ties to. So we need to send a message to our manufacturers that they are important, and we will get creative to help find solutions for opening up some land in the city of Grand Haven. And remember those top 10 employers that I showed you at the beginning of the list? Half of those employees are working right near the vicinity of the airport. So thank you. That's all I had prepared for tonight, but I just wanted to give you a high-level overview of some of the issues that our businesses are facing today.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Does anyone have questions?
few for you. What was the percentage that you said was coming from Muskegon to work?
I didn't say a percentage coming from, well, for our manufacturers, about 70 to 75% of the production floor workers.
All right.
So there are quite a few workers that are coming in.
Yeah, so that's pretty significant. I appreciate you really hitting on the, you know, our manufacturers being the biggest industry. A lot of folks think Grand Haven, they think tourism, that's our but we have, you know, I really appreciate you hitting on that. I know it's been hit on before, but it's really important for the community to kind of keep hearing that message. But when folks come and work here and collect paychecks here, but then can't afford to live here, they're not spending their money directly locally. Yeah, it may still be along the lake shore here to our brothers and sisters to the north and south, but there's still some lost opportunities there. Can we get just kind of a quick update? I know there's been a lot of really good work done and some discussions that are occurring between MATS and Harbor Transit about what's kind of maybe in the works and what's being studied on that transportation front, because I think that's important to kind of highlight.
Mm-hmm. You want me to highlight them? Oh, no.
Whether you or Pat, whoever.
Well, Bob also serves on the Harbor Transit Board. We do have a Windsor Deck. The West Michigan Regional Shoreline Development Commission is doing a study. They stepped up to spearhead this study. We got a grant to look at MATS and Harbor Transit to look into different options we have to collaborate and hopefully connect, from possibly just having a bus stop in between the two to full collaboration and joining of the systems and everything in between. We'll look at all the different options that are available and then sit down and talk about what works best for both communities. So that's probably, you know, a 12-month study that we're maybe getting close to the halfway point.
Okay, that's what I was wondering where that's at. Okay. And just real quick too, when you talk about land to expand, the Dake property, obviously it's owned, but you know, it's a large piece of property. I don't know how large it is, but I mean, is there any word about, you know, use of that property and land?
I do know what they are intending to do with that, but I don't think it's public at this point.
So there's something in the works.
I appreciate all the efforts that you put into trying to find solutions for folks to get here to work and businesses to stay, so thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I've been a big pusher for trying to get transportation for quite a few years now. I've been trying to get MATS, Austin, Grand Haven, Holland, Grand Rapids, make a big loop. It would be so much nicer if our legislators would help us cross lines and stuff like that. We could all work together on it, so glad to hear that our transportation system here is actually working very hard at it. And we don't really have a whole lot of property here, but I know that Grand Haven Township has lots of property out there. And if I remember correctly, I did get a little thing from my property that they're expanding their DDA district down and hopefully putting some more industry toward M45. Is that what you hear in the works too?
Yes. They're expanding the DDA district and looking to master plan some land out there.
Yeah, because they have a lot more area to expand into industrious than we do. We're kind of landlocked here. But Ryan's actually correct. We have the Dake property that's open. You know, we don't have to take, I know these people like to expand at the airport and all, but it's something that we have, and it's very difficult to get rid of once you have something that's very viable and it's doing well. But yeah, as long as we look out there at the township too, also, if we want to get more industry and get transportation, I agree with you 100%. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Very interesting, and I agree that it's nice to look at that Dake property and see if we can get some development out there. That would be a great place to put some industry out there. But thanks for your report, and it's a little eye-opening to see how many employees come from other regions to work here. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I spent my entire career working in industry, so I appreciate that as well. And manufacturing is a critical piece of our local economy.
It is.
We need to nurture that, grow it if possible, sustain it to the extent we can. And all the things you've said that are challenges, or certainly are challenges, we need to continue to pursue solutions to them. The Harbor Transit to MATS connection is something we've been working on. They're funded, the way they're funded and the boundaries around the funding has been the big obstacle. And crossing those lines is a matter of logistics as well as a matter of administration and funding, and so we've been working on that. There's a study going on and how that transfer of people from place to place can be done both efficiently and conveniently so that people are willing to actually do it, and also works in the world of financing and maintaining transit systems. It's a tough nut to crack, but I know we're working on it, and that there's a study going on. Where that's going to go, it's a little hard to say at this point. I know with land, it's pretty hard to create land out of nothing. We did a little bit of beach nourishment, but I don't think that's gonna cut it. We're not gonna gain our land that direction. And anytime you have land somewhere, you have to have both utilities and access to roads and such, so you can't pick just any piece of land. And, a lot of in the township is very focused on residential, so there's always the balancing act. The city is largely built out, not a lot of space, and certainly not large parcels. When I was working at Howmet, it was like, they would never look at anything smaller than 20 acres, and moving up from there. So in our community, that would be a challenge. Perhaps not insurmountable, working in collaboration with our neighbors, and that's what the chamber brings to us, is working across the municipal boundaries and tying us all together as one big community. I appreciate that, and I think that's a real key here. And of course, we are a tapestry of different industries, different economic endeavors. We have tourism is important, manufacturing is really very important, the retail, all the various aspects of our community where it is a complex matter. And I appreciate the attention that you bring to that and how you try to tie all those loose ends together, because I think it is really it's a great challenge and a great puzzle. So thank you for all your efforts.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments, anything from you, Pat?
No, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is a pension report 2021 by Pat McGinnis.
Thank you, Your Honor. 2 meetings ago, I believe, Councilmember Dora asked for an update and some clarity and brevity in terms of the pension condition, what it is, and what we're looking at. Previous reports last February, and then before that it was 2018, were accompanied by significant charts and spreadsheets and things with an awful lot of complexity to it. And Mike asked that we try to make it clear and as brief as possible. So I'm going to try to do that. It's a very complex issue, but I'll try to keep it quick. First off, what is our pension system? It's a defined benefit system where our employees and the employers, so the taxpayer and the employees, contribute to a system that is defined by the number of years our employees spend working for us, times a multiplier, times their final average compensation. So you take those 3 elements and combine them. It's a formula, and it gives you what they're going to earn in retirement. This is was a very common benefit in decades past, and many communities have withdrawn from this sort of benefit over time. In Grand Haven, we had a long-standing negotiated arrangement with our employees that we share the cost 50-50. It was recognized this was a very attractive type of benefit. It's great for recruitment, and we have a 6-year vesting period, and part of the intention of such a program is to encourage employees to stick around for the long haul. When you get a good employee, you train them, they come to work for you, they're loyal, they're honest, they work hard, and they earn a long-term benefit by staying with us for many, many years. We like to keep our people around for full careers, and we're often very successful at that. It's a good staff in public safety, public works, and general government. We tend to retain our employees pretty well. And I think part of it is that pension earning, that that if you stick around for 30 years, you can earn a pretty responsible pension. So that's what a defined benefit is. I just wanted to explain that. The other side of the pension type is the defined contribution, where you just put in a certain percentage of your earnings each year, and the employer possibly matches that. That gets set aside in a fund that's usually managed by the employee, and it rises and falls with the economy and does what it does. And then when you retire, you've got a certain amount of money that you set up to make periodic payments to you throughout your retirement, and you pray to God that your investments outlast you. And that's another, probably more common form of saving for retirement. But in Grand Haven, we have now, and will likely continue to have some form of defined benefit. So if we can go to the next slide. Just want to kind of address some concerns that an average person might have about such a system. First off, is this a real rich benefit? Is this something that is more generous than what you would usually see, or is it something that the taxpayers are being asked to foot that is irregular or unusual? And you need to answer that with the fact that the employees do pay half of that cost. And like I said, that's been long standing, and back in the early 2000s, it was 2% of your earnings as an employee and 2% of your earnings as the employer. And it worked pretty well for us. When you look at what we're doing today, the multiplier that I mentioned, you take your number of years times the multiplier times your salary. The multiplier for public safety is at 2.5%, and for all other employees at 1.75%. And when you average these two and you account for the fact that the employee is paying half of that, the taxpayer is actually funding a multiplier of about 1.06%. So consider an employee that might work for us for 30 years. When they retire at the end of 30 years, what the taxpayer is paying for would be about 30% of their final earnings in retirement. And that would not be overly generous type benefit. For example, teachers in Michigan are currently at a 1.5% multiplier. So that's just by comparison, or for comparison's sake. So just to give you an idea of what the size or the type of benefit we have, I thought I would share that. What have we done thus far? We've known this is a growing problem for a while. So one of the first things we were directed to do, some 6 or 8 years ago, is go to the employees and ask them to take, to offer some concessions. And we have to do that through the collective bargaining process. It's not something we just walk in and do. So that's a bit of an arduous process that we engaged in. With public safety, we have a thing called Act 312. Thank you, Zachary. So glad he's here. Act 312, which is binding arbitration, but we treat our public works union with equal respect. We treat them as if they have arbitration. We don't just storm in and say you don't have it. So we negotiated with them as well. So we negotiated with both unions, and they both accepted a full 0.5% reduction in that multiplier, which when you average it out again, the public safety multiplier was higher. It's a 22% reduction in that pension benefit. And then we approached the general employees who are non-union and said, we've negotiated this with the unions, and I know you don't like it, but we are going to reduce our pension multiplier, and we did that. And that is still taking hold. We're seeing the results of that as time goes forward. All of the assumptions that are used and all of the projections that are used are based on long-term floating averages and smoothing effects that the actuarial people put in place to try to make this manageable. So it's not immediate when you make changes. You don't see an instant change. It's gradual over time. And like when you have a big fall off in the economy or a strong economy, it takes a while for those influences to be felt in the form of what we have to pay to stay in this. So I just wanted to share that we did go to the employees and say, how about we reduce this benefit a bit? And they did agree with that, and we got that done over the last several years. And then finally, the largest chunk of this whole thing is public safety. And it's important that people know that they do not receive Social Security. So they do not pay into the Social Security system, and neither do we, neither does the taxpayer. So that's, on that side of the ledger, that's a savings for us. That's just under 7% annual percentage of salary that we don't have to pay in for those employees. So that goes towards that pension benefit. So those are just 3 Q&As that I wanted to share to kind of maybe clear up some misunderstandings about the benefit we have and what it looks like and what's been done so far. The options you have are possibly switched to a defined contribution or stick with a defined benefit. And this is what we looked at in 2018 and presented all kinds of, if you remember, the finance director had a lot of charts with lots of lines on them that explain this. And Amy came back this last February. Amy Bessinger is our finance director. She's here tonight. She presented it a little more cleanly with just a couple of lines showing what that projection is. And what Mr. Dora asked is, well, how much is it? It'd be easier if we knew what that number was totally. So if you stay with your defined benefit, the total cost from now to 2040 would cost about $42 million. That's the current projections. That's what we have from our administrator at the Michigan Employees Retirement System. If you terminate that plan and you replace it with a defined contribution plan today, that number would be about $50 million is the current projection. So in other words, it's about $8 million less expensive to stay with your current plan, are our current projections. So when that was presented to you in 2018 and again in early 2021, the city council looked at that and said, well, we probably don't want to go with the higher cost option of closing the plans. So for now, let's stick with the defined benefit. And it's very important to explain that city council set a goal for this year to act, to take steps to change that and come up with a plan. So that will be the next phase of this explanation, will be what steps we've proposed, and city council will want to point us in a direction of one or more of those steps to come up with ways to solve this. And I want to wrap up, I know it's 7:30, with very recent information from our finance department. The books are closed for 2021 for the budget year. We had been looking at a deficit condition. I can now report that we will be in the black for the last fiscal year. We'll likely come in with a surplus of into the six figures for the 2020-21 fiscal year. So as this was being framed up, we were also talking about having a deficit budget. We do not have a deficit budget in the general fund for the last year. We often predict things as constrained and frugally as possible, very conservatively, planning for the worst and hoping for the best. And then when we get our audit, I expect we will see a general fund budget well into the black for this last fiscal year. So I just wanted to share that information with you tonight as well.
Okay, thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
We're at a point now where we need to close our work session, move on to our regular session. If there are questions council would like to ask or have further discussion on this, we can take it up again at the appropriate time during our regular meeting agenda. So at this point, we're going to close the special work session and open our regular city council meeting for October 4th, 2021. Ashley, would you call the roll?
Scott,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Dora,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
Manetza.
Here. At this point, let's see, we have invocation by Reverend Troy Hauser-Bryden. And so you please stand for the invocation and remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Lord, you've given us this world, this life, this community, and we give you thanks for all of these gifts. We give you thanks for life together and for leaders who help guide this community into what is best, what is equitable, what is just. And so we pray for your guidance tonight on the work of our city council and the work of our mayor and the work of our city. Lord, that you might lead us in good paths, in paths that lead to life, to liberty, and to joy and to justice in this community. And we give you thanks for this life together and for this evening. We pray all of these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, so we have no appointments, reappointments to boards and commissions this evening, but we have a presentation from the Musical Fountain Committee. Let's see. Pat, do you want to start this, or shall I just call on the committee to come on?
I think the committee speaks for themselves.
I think they do. Would you please identify yourselves?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and members of the audience. I'm Andy Cawthon. I'm Vice Chair of the Musical Fountain Committee, and this is Terry Stevens.
Terry L. Stevens. I'm the fountain engineer and crew leader for our fountain operators.
Ashley, do we have sound?
We do. I'll start it right now.
Good evening and welcome to the Grand Haven Musical Fountain. This exhilarating display of water, color, and music has been pleasing Grand Haven visitors for over 50 years. Tonight's performance is made possible through support from the City of Grand Haven and generous donations by you, our valued guests. If you enjoy the show, please consider placing a donation in the drop boxes near the stadium exit. Alternately, you can donate to the fountain through the Grand Haven Community Foundation. To learn more about the Musical Fountain, see the nightly playlist and upcoming events, please visit us at ghfountain.com. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's performance of the Grand Haven Musical Fountain.
We do.
We do.
I want to play that for every city council meeting now.
Go to your local merchant and have an ice cream, a cocktail, or a dinner, please.
Okay.
For those that don't know, 2022 will be the 60th anniversary of production seasons for the Grand Haven Musical Fountain. We claimed at one point to be the largest musical fountain in the world. Bellagio had a bigger budget, so did Disney, so did the Arabs. So we're one of the most amazing musical fountain attractions in the world and in the Midwest. Our current committee members are a wide range of experiences, from engineers, public citizens, students, volunteers, lovers of the fountain. Our operators, although they are paid by the city, most of them are professional career people, and most of them are not being operators on the fountain for the money, but for the love of it. Many of them grew up with it. Many of their family members were part of Creason's original crew that put the fountain together. So it's quite a history. We are organized into 4 main committees: maintenance, and Terry will speak to that, production and song show presentation and development. And I'll point out, again, gratefully, the support of City Council and Department of Public Works. For example, City Council funding the new software that runs the fountain. We call one playback and one choreography, but you were instrumental in funding the development of that software, in part so that the city would own the asset. And that was not true for the first 50 years of the fountain. Likewise, the software that runs the PLC was not a city asset. It now is. The backup technology, the computers, were not part of the city. They now are. So that has been a very definite move in the last 5 years to make the entire asset a city-owned asset. Fundraising, example, in the replacement of the sound system 2 years ago, we raised about $120,000. There was some in-kind work on the part of Public Works, but the public was quite generous, coming up with the $120,000 budget to replace the sound system, which after 30 years was a little bit tired, and our sound quality has gotten a lot better. Public relations, press, and social media, I will encapsulate by 2 statements. If you look at the right-hand side of the panel, you'll see that we have over 20,000 people following the fountain. We announce every show every night on Facebook and other social media, including Instagram, where we now have over 1,500 people following Fountain. And these people are following us from the continental US, from Europe, from Asia, including some of our programmers, one in Singapore. To give you an example of show reach, we'll announce a show, especially a theme show like The Greatest Showman, currently our most popular. We reached 58,000 people with the announcement. There were 2,400 responses. And if you visually go back to that first slide, there was a picture of a crowd sitting across from the musical fountain. That was not the stadium. That was the parking lot at 1 South Harbor. When we do a theme show like The Greatest Showman, we'll have attendance that we can count in the stadium and the surrounding buildings, 6,000 to 7,000 people on a weeknight. That's quite a draw when you compare it to other events downtown, like Coast Guard Festival, and we would maintain that, aside from festival, we're probably the largest seasonal draw in Grand Haven in the summer. Our estimated attendance, rough counts in a non-COVID year, over 100,000 per year. To get into some of the technical details of what we've been doing, I'll turn it over to Terry.
All right, thank you, Andy. And I'll try not to get too bogged down in the details, but I do want the takeaway to be this, that this is more than just a fountain. And I do enjoy sitting in the audience and listen to the oohs and ahs, and sometimes a question like, I wonder if they use colored water. The fountain is extremely complex, and I think most people don't really have an appreciation for that. As an engineer, I do. The sound system is nearly 30,000 watts. There's an electrical distribution system that includes 2,300 volts to run the motors. There's hydraulic oil system to run the sweeps. There's, of course, a water system with 275 horsepower of water pumps to deliver all of that action. At high compressed air, 125 psi, or 125 psi for the water, 175 psi for the pneumatic air system. All the valves are air piloted, so there's an entire pneumatic system. And then the mechanical, the helix, the garage door openers, the sweeps that move. There's a tremendous amount of mechanics to the system. The lighting system, there's an LED system, 43 different light fixtures, up to 2 million colors. This is what the pump house used to look like. This picture is pre-1983 when I first got involved. We have an operator who loves to paint, so he's been repainting everything. This is a very current picture. Things look great. And on top of all that, all the other systems, we have a high level of automation. The lighting system, it's called DMX. It's a format of Ethernet that's used for theatrical productions and DJs. There's 3 Ethernet switches with 21 ports. There's 2 personal computers, so we have a backup system at literally the push of an AB button. We can switch from one computer to another. The water system is all run with an Allen Bradley programmable logic controller, which is my area of high expertise. We have a spare PLC system, which switches with an AB switch. And we have 2 entire operator interface devices. They're called panel views. The software, as Andy mentioned, the city now owns, which is tremendous, and including everything in the pump house the city now owns. And then there's the music library on top of that. It takes some artistry to put this together, people who know what music is current, what music would be popular with our audiences. We have 12 different theme shows, as Andy mentioned, that have large draws. And then we have about 120 songs from which we create custom playlists. The playback software was put in 2014, the city-owned playback software, and the choreography software in 2015. So these are quite recent developments. Other recent developments in 2013, most of the major pipes were replaced. The asphalt basin was resurfaced. My class at Grand Valley did a PLC retrofit. The PLC was actually donated by Rockwell Automation, $19,000. The LED lighting system was put in 2014, replacing incandescent lights, which were aircraft landing lights. The software in 2015, a new air compressor in 16. The Wave and the Helix, which was another GVSU project, putting in the new Helix and the Wave, and a new sound system, as Andy mentioned, in 2019. That was over $100,000. And last year, we had the COVID year. We only did about four shows. We had a transformer failure and a lot of motor issues. This year, we've been very busy. We created a punch list and went after it with a vengeance with our task force of volunteers. We have over 200 items on the punch list. We completed about 2/3 of that. And we put in a kind of a mini museum in the operator station and the pump house for VIP tours. We put in the backup PC, the backup PLC, a spare HMI. We had 2 major task force days to rewire the wave and to do a lot of painting. I estimate we saved about $10,000 in labor from volunteers. We put in a pre-show lighting test now, and so we test the water, the lights, and the communications before every show. And that picture on the right hand there of the slide is new this year, is a sound select for selecting between high bass and low bass, and high sound on the side speakers and low sound on the side speakers. And the intent here is to minimize the impact to the city so that when we have a regular show during the weeknight, we minimize the sound, but for one of our large theme shows, we can kick up the sound and the bass. This year, the transformer was replaced, our motor issues went away, we bought digital radios, and we joined the 21st century and put the operator schedule on Google so all the operators can see it on their phone, which has been very helpful. So I'll turn it back over to Andy to close with what are our goals moving forward. And Andy, take it from here.
Thank you, Terry. We've watched other organizations in the city, very specifically the Lighthouse Conservancy, to see how they are operating, especially on project-related funding. And they've created a structure that basically has them somewhat at arm's length from the city, even though the lighthouse is still a city asset. And with Pat McGinnis's coaching, we're pursuing becoming our own 501c3 so that we can raise funds, spend them on projects, and any leftover funds would go into the Community Foundation Master Fund for the city fountain, or for the musical fountain. In order to fundraise, our model this year was Grand Haven Beach Company, who volunteered to partner with us for musical fountain logoed t-shirts. And at the end of the season, they handed us a check for $7,000, which was our portion after their costs for all these t-shirts that they sold. In the future, what we want to do is create a family of branded, logoed, and copyrighted merchandise with the musical fountain logo that we could take to business partners downtown by, let's call it a category, and say, does somebody want to sell a logoed coffee cup? Do they want to have a stock of them in their store? Can we partner like we did with Grand Haven Beach Co. and have a company selling coffee cups? We would certainly go to Michigan Rag / Mariska and say, how about hoodies, long sleeve shirts, placemats, seat cushions, whatever we can do. The idea being that we would copyright everything to the musical fountain logo, and if we were to change the logo, copyright anything new with the new logo. That would give the city the right to control that copyright. So we very much want this to be a city asset and city-generated funding. We are exploring text to donate. We've found that anything like cell phone coverage during a performance or a donation box, which used to exist in the old stadium, those funds tend to go into the general fund with the city. We don't get access to them. But if we do text to fund, text to donate, we could route that through a 501c3 and have project-based funding that we could manage pretty well. Again, coming back to the 60-year anniversary, Terry and his students at Grand Valley are working up a new set of water features. The Wave and Helix were the first new things on the fountain in 50 years. That was a couple of years ago. So Terry's working on concepts. The partnership with Grand Valley has been spectacular, by the way, so kudos to them as well. But our concept is on August 27th, 2022, we would have an event, a new show, and a debut of new features on the fountain for that date. So I'll work with Char Sace to file the event forms, to freeze that, to make sure it gets on the city calendar. Then we'll get it on Facebook. Ideally, by then, we'll have merchandising in process. And we hope you can join us for the show on the 27th. We again thank you very much for your continuing support. But what you'll see is we have a 5-year capital projection of some $111,000 of things that the fountain's going to need. The most pressing thing right now is a new roof for the control building. We painted it, we dry locked it, and the first thing we saw when we came back the next weekend was we had rainwater and gravel inside the building. So the tar paper seal, or the tar seal on the tar paper roof has failed, and some of the plywood decking as well. Anyway, so back to our capital requirements. Our annual budget, working with Derek Gaidos at Public Works, we think with our ASCAP license, operator, hourly wages, et cetera, it's about $40,000 a year. This is going to be on top of that over the next 5 years. We will need help. We'd like to fundraise for it, but we appreciate the support from the city. So there we are. Thank you for your audience and the opportunity. What we would like to propose, by the way, is a post-season recap, such as this, for City Council, and then a pre-season, what do we expect this year, presentation as well. So, unlike previous history, where you haven't heard much from us, we'd like to fix that as well. Thank you.
We would certainly like to hear more from you as well, and appreciate the great work you do on this really unique asset. And it couldn't be done, we couldn't maintain this and improve it without the work of your committee and all your comrades and all your volunteers. Appreciate that. Questions or comments for Mr. Cawthon or Mr. Stevens?
Just to say that, 60 years is what a milestone. I appreciate you putting things into perspective with significance of the fountain. When you're traveling on 96 and you're getting off to go towards Grand Haven and Spring Lake, there's a sign that says musical fountain, and that's showing a pretty significant feature of our community. So I've learned a lot through your presentation. Thank you for it. Look forward to celebrating your 60 years next year, but really just to touch on what the mayor just indicated, it's pretty impressive, the work and the passion that your committee members and all those that help design shows and put shows on, all the work that you do, so thank you.
What we'd like to do is invite all of you to come up and tour the fountain. Some of you have been there. You haven't been there since we had our painting maniac. There's a lot of dead time once you hit play on the show, and he just grabs a can of paint and
put it on.
There we go. So
well, I'll take you up on it. I'd like to see it up close.
Please come up.
Pictures were cool. So.
All right. Thank you again.
Andy, I just want to tell you thank you. My brother started on it when it first was down there. He would take donations down at the Fishers and Bridles, had their coal dock down there at the time when it first started out. And so my family's been involved with that for many, many years. And to see it come to where it is today is quite an amazement of what you guys have done. So I want to say thank you to all of you that worked on it and made it better than what it's ever been. So keep up the good work and many more years to come.
To echo a comment that Terry has made a couple of times, if you haven't been up there in a while, despite all the things we're saying need fixing, the fountain's in probably better shape than it was on the day it opened.
I can probably attest to some of that.
You don't
I've
have
been
to
up
row-
there.
You don't have to row across the river to start a show now.
Thank you, Andy, for all your hard work.
All you guys.
Andy, Terry, thank you and the rest of the Fountain crew for all the work that you do and the love and passion that you put into it. It's great to hear that the transformer replacement has solved the pump motor issue. That was, yeah, knock on wood for that.
One problem all season, I think it's fixed.
I'd like to hear that. That was a bit of a dilemma when we were up there trying to figure it out, but I'm glad to hear that that's resolved it. 100,000 people a year, you think about that, or 6,000 for a theme show night. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, it really is.
It's free.
Yeah, and, partnering with the Grand Haven Beach Company and the T-shirts that they sold and the effort that they put into selling those at every show, which we attended quite a few of, was a great fundraising idea as well. So, again, thank you.
To do a hats off for Nikki Bonsick, who's part of our social media and marketing group. She's also done business partnerships with the various restaurants and other companies right there on the waterfront. Her work has been incredibly well received. So if we have a theme show that might mention ice cream, we go to Dairy Cream, we go to Temptations and say, do you guys want to do something in conjunction with the show? And it really gets everybody involved. It really works out really nicely.
Well, I appreciate the
Kirby.
presentation too, so.
Kirby is doing private viewings on their deck, so I think you have to pay for those, but that's pretty nice. So thank you again.
Thank
Well,
you.
that's the wonder of entrepreneurship. People find ways to make this work. But what I really appreciate is that, yes, we're 60 years in on this. It was a unique feature when it was built, and it was pretty innovative, pretty complex, and it's more so now, but more efficient and better operating. Everything is upgraded, but you've kept it fresh. So oftentimes, when a feature gets to be of this age, and it's been through spells when it was a little bit, well, sometimes, I wouldn't know, because I've forgotten. But there have been times over its history when it needed some refreshing, and there's times like now when the love that the volunteers have for it and the love the community has for it has kept it not just going, but interesting every year. And there's always something new, and there's always something to bring people back. That's really a feat all by itself. So appreciate that, and it doesn't come without a lot of work. So thanks for all that. Appreciate all the information about what's needed. I have been up there. I think it's an amazing facility up there. People don't appreciate it until you see it. I mean, there's a lot to it. But thank you for everything you've done.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, well, that was very good. We are up to the approval of the consent and regular agendas. Are there any changes?
I have none, Your Honor.
Any changes from council members?
Yeah, I'd like to move 11C from the consent agenda to new business, be item 12B.
11C?
Yep. For some discussion.
Okay. And anything else? If not, I could use a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, motion by Dora, second by Cummins to approve the consent and regular agendas as changed. Please call the roll.
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes?
Manetza.
Yes. That brings us to our first call to the audience. This is the first of two opportunities. This time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address, will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Who would like to address council? Come on up.
Good evening, council. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Thanks for letting me go first.
Okay. You were the quickest.
My name is Mick Bricker, and I'm from Spring Lake. And I just wanted to introduce myself to you tonight. I'm running for the Michigan 89th District House seat. Right now, it's currently 89th. Who knows how this thing's going to turn out? Purpose of my introduction is just to let you know who I am and what I'm hoping that this seat is all about. And that is, I'm going to virtually every single one of the governmental meetings so that I can introduce myself, so I can see who everybody is, so I can see some of the concerns. And then the idea is that this is a conduit back to Lansing, so that I already know exactly what your issues are, what the problems are, what the good stuff is, and vice versa. As stuff is starting to come down in this direction, I can give you a heads up. And especially with things that you're going to have to fund that you don't want to do, the unintended consequences, which you don't need. And so that is one of the most important parts of this role. So I just wanted to say hi. Thank you for a couple of minutes. Love what you're doing. So this first hour, I think, has been very, very eye-opening and very productive. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bricker. Did you give us your address?
It is 15656 River Run, and that is Spring Lake, 49456.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
We need that for the minutes. Who's next? There will be a second call to the audience at the end of the meeting, but if you'd like to address council on any agenda item or anything not on the agenda prior to us taking any further actions, now would be a good time for that. And if no one's coming up, then we will close the first call to the audience. At this point, the agenda calls for a continuation of the work session. We cut that off a little bit abruptly because we ran out of time, so I'm going to open this back up for comments or questions by council on the presentation on the pension benefits. Anyone have anything to say or comment or question?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to, it seems I was the one that asked for this presentation. I'd like to see a little more meat on the bones, so to say. We're looking at $8 million in difference it would cost to go to a defined contribution plan. I guess I'd like to see where that $8 million comes from. It may be in the 2018 report that went out. I'm not sure. I wasn't here then. If that information is available in there, I guess I would like to see that so that we can review that and actually look at it. I know if I came up with the idea of saving, $421,000 a year for the next 19 years, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who'd want to see in writing where I was planning on doing that from. So I kind of like to see where that all comes from, where those figures are derived at, and look at that, if that's possible, if that's in the 2018 report or not, I'm not sure.
It was well thought out and presented in last February, and we've got all of the actuarial studies, and there, you'd asked for something quick and to the point and brief, so I only had 15 minutes, but I'm very happy to get into it at a future work session and get really into the details. I know Amy is as well. Very conversant in all those details, and the big increase is in what's called the annual required contribution. We go from being funded on a percentage basis of our payroll to paying an absolute amount. They just tell us how much we have to pay each year because there's no new payers coming in at that point if you close it. So that lack of that's in a nutshell as best as I can put it, but there's a lot more to it than that, but we could certainly get you all the detail you'd like.
Thank you.
And I believe one of the factors is also the amount of the contribution the city would make, whether it's 5%, 10%, some other number. That's a number that you would have to negotiate. The contribution the city would make in a defined contribution
correct, yes,
plan.
yes. If we close the plan, right now the assumptions you've seen are based on a 10%, because that is the number we negotiated with public safety when we got them to agree to allow us to close the plan. And that was based on what you authorized the Board of Light and Power to do a couple years ago. They came forward and said they would like to close their plan, and they offered a 10% employer match. So that kind of set the bar there. So that's where we started. But yeah, that could be negotiated further. But right now it's at 10% defined contribution from the employer.
Right?
Right, that's, yep, I understood the baseline on that, but we also negotiated that language coming out, of the contract in line with some other benefits, right? That language came out of the public safety contract.
No, it's still 10% if we close it.
If.
We have to provide a 10%.
Right, I thought specifically that language came out of their contract, that we negotiated that out of there. And
We may have taken it out of the last one. We had it in and then it came out.
and specific, in return for other benefits going in. That was a specific discussion, and I can't get into the discussion. 'Cause it was
Yeah, we can pull that up for you and get back into that.
But yeah, I understand you have to have a starting point, and it's certainly negotiable, but, you know, I just want to, I guess, because I thought, you know, I didn't realize that Councilman Dora was looking for something a little bit more quick and brief. Because when I got this, I didn't see this as much, you know, I was wanting more of an actual report, more of the meat and potatoes, I guess, and the meat on the bones. You know, and maybe we need to have just a separate special meeting, and maybe we need to wait for to find out what's going to happen with the election, so we don't have to repeat conversations if there's any changes. But at some point, I think, you know, we need to really sit and hash this out, because really for our employees, it's not good for them to continue to have some of this uncertainty over there, some of their economic future. I mean, that's this conversation can't continue to kind of be, you know, linger out there. That does have an impact on them. You know, from my perspective, I am a city employee in another municipality, and so I can understand that concern. And, you know, when I see that 17% number, I realize that they don't have a generous, overly generous pension benefit, because they're paying, you know, or we're paying half. I mean, now we've capped it, but still 17%. I guarantee a lot of them, when they started working here many years ago, the ones that have been around for a long time, weren't expecting to pay, and I'm sure their unions weren't expecting to pay 17% down the road towards their pension costs. I mean, that's just a significant amount, especially when you look at, you know, I had to dig a little bit for it, and maybe you've sent it previously and I missed it, but I had to dig a little bit for that, the recent MERS report for that ended, you know, December of last year, and it kind of lays out how those contributions have gone up over time, and they're pretty significant over the last 10 years. And for me, if I was an employee, that you know, would have a big impact. And the other thing I just want to push back a little bit on, and maybe Zach can prove me exactly wrong on this as an HR professional, and I'd love to see, you know, the information, but, you know, me as a millennial, and I talked with a lot of my other millennial colleagues, you know, we view work maybe a little bit differently, employers a little bit differently. And so I understand, as an employer, you want to attract people, you want to attract loyal employees, you have a lot of time and investment in them, and you want to keep them long term, but I'm not sure that a lot of millennials are looking at it in maybe the exact same way. And so if they say, well, I got to pay 17% into a pension, and maybe I'm not looking at that employer being my employer for my entire career because I want different options, that may just not be the right recruitment model anymore. And so, and then if you look at the fact that, okay, well, if I stay 6 years to at least get my vested period in, when I leave, yeah, you're going to give me my pension for what I have vested, but you're going to base it on the, you know, when I retire, the wages that I made, God knows how many years ago, right? It's not being adjusted for inflation, correct? They're locked into what they were making when they left at that 6-year mark, even if they retired 25, 30 years from now, correct? So that, and maybe I'm wrong on that.
No, they are, but, or they can take their 17% with them. That's their money. We don't keep that. That 17% is theirs. If they put it in, they can take that when they leave, or they can leave it and collect later when they retire. That's their option.
So they could take that money and cash it out and invest it into another,
When they leave,
to
yeah.
whatever they want, an IRA or whatever they wanted. See, that could hurt our system long term too, right? Because then you don't have somebody paying into it anymore, and you've lost their half of what they put in towards, you know, the liability, right? Because right now the liabilities was kind of owned, you know, by half. And just another, you know, perspective on this, and I appreciate, and actually this is something that Karen Lowe sent to me. I didn't realize this was out there, so I appreciate. I hadn't seen this before. So the state of Michigan has this financial dashboard, and it's not, I'm sure, an apples-to-apples comparison amongst all communities, because all these, you know, plans are made up differently. But it was really interesting. Of the communities that report data for pension health, out of 241 communities that reported data, we were listed as 228th as far as our pension health. We were low, you know, we're 5%, 5th percentile. And I think that was on a per capita basis they were looking at it on. And there's some other figures on there that show that we're doing pretty well with some other figures. Our debt health is another story, and I'll save it for another day. So, you I know that the council decided, a few years ago said, stay the course, and there were some concessions that our employees certainly gave that are significant in bridging that multiplier. But then we look at, okay, so we had some savings there, but then we have these actual changes that have continued to occur. So have we really gained ground in that few years? And maybe we have, maybe we haven't. I don't have all that information. But if we gain the ground that we expected even in that 3-year period of time, or from those changes that we expected to make, or are we still just digging a deeper and deeper hole that is this going to be, a huge challenge until that magic 2040 year mark, which I still don't understand how 2040 versus just magically figured out that that's a year that everybody is all of a sudden better. But so that's just some counter things that I think are worth thinking about and having further discussion on as we continue this important discussion. So hopefully we'll have some answers too soon.
Thanks, Ryan. Anyone else?
No.
Okay. All right, and at some point, these are obligations that we have that must be dealt with, and so whatever formula we come up with, we're still going to have a big nut to pay for, and that's where that money comes from is something that we'll have to work out, because even if you change plans and come up with a different plan, there's still the unfunded liability out there, and what we've been talking about tonight is how this may or may not grow going into the future, but what we have today still has to be dealt with, and it's consuming a significant amount of our general fund. And so I think the other half of our discussion is how are we dealing with what's already obligated. And I think that's not an answer for tonight, but that was part of the continuing discussion. So as we have more presentations on this, I think that's another piece of it. Okay, anyone else on this item, or shall we move on?
Good.
Okay, well, then I'm going to close the continuation of the work session, and we will move on with the consent agenda. Ashley, can you read that?
This is to approve council minutes for the special work session and regular council meeting of September 20th, 2021. To approve the bills memo in the amount of $13,908,203.46. To approve a resolution to accept the grant award for the construction of new parking area and basketball courts in conjunction with the city's Land and Water Conservation Fund grant in the amount of $258,300. To approve the MERS joint transfer agreement to transfer the Board of Light and Power's portion of the retiree health funding vehicle to the BLP's MERS plan, and authorize the Human Resources Manager to execute the necessary documents, and to approve the minimum standards for commercial aeronautical activities at the Grand Haven Memorial Airport.
Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Well, that sounds like a tie, but
Support it, I'll support it.
okay. Motion by Fritz, second by Scott to approve the consent agenda. Questions on these items on the consent agenda or comments?
I'm just gonna say, I always say a 13 million, almost 12 million of that was in taxes that we had to do. And also, this is our last payment on the Grand Landing, which was, what, 1.2 million? So, glad to see that, that's done. And all that stuff, we start coming back to us now. So, things gonna look good.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, thank you.
Hmm?
Thank you, Mike, for that. That's a good, important note. I just had one change to the minutes that I emailed Pat about earlier today, and he kind of came up with some language. The language for the removal of the first BLP bond resolution that we had tabled from a previous meeting that we then subsequently removed because of them withdrawing their project. Our current draft minutes is stated that Mayor Manessa requested that item 13B be removed from the agenda. And I felt that it really needed some more context to understand some of the, somebody was simply looking at the minutes to understand why it kind of fell off. There was good information on our agenda. So he came up with, Mayor Manessa requested that 13B be removed from the agenda because the Board of Light and Power has withdrawn all plans to pursue the construction of a power supply source and offices on Harbor Island, and the project that, as originally proposed, is no longer under consideration. So the approval of the bond as originally defined or requested is now moot. So it at least provides some context to somebody simply looking at the progression through the minutes. So I'm just proposing that change to the minutes.
I think the observation I made at the time was that the approval for the new $28 million notice of intent included a clause at the end, rescinds other conflicting resolutions. And that would have been one of those conflicting resolutions, so it was already rescinded before we would have gotten to it. That was my logic.
Well, either way, I think we arrived at the same point.
Well, I mean, certainly we did, we took that action, but, I mean, as I recall, when we discussed why was it being taken off, it's because it was already being dealt with before it came to that point in the agenda.
Well, something more than just we requested that it be removed, I think needs to be pretty clear in the minutes. I mean, I think that's the point. I mean, what it specifically says and the reasoning, I think is.
Well, granted, there was reasoning.
Right, there was reasoning that was listed on our agenda. And then I do recall you mentioning that as well. So some sort of combination of those items, I trust staff to draft that language and add it in. The rest of the council does as well, but.
Yeah, because item 12B on that agenda, the last clause is,
Yep.
and rescind any other resolutions that conflict with this resolution.
Yep.
Which would have, I mean, that was how I couched it when I asked it to be removed. All those other things you said are true, and they're all effective. And so if we want to take all that and put it in the minutes, that's fine. The main thing about the minutes is records what we did and should have a hint as to what our logic was. So I'm not opposed to these changes. So you got all that, Ashley?
Got it.
She's nodding. Okay.
It's recorded.
Anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay, and I have no other changes either. I'll repeat what Mike said about we're making our last payment on the Grand Landing debt as part of this bill's memo, and that's a great feeling. All right, if there are no other questions, then I would call for a vote.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. Okay. Now, we have one item of new business. No, we have two items of new business, because we just got one. First item of new business.
This is to approve an encroachment permit for 1805 Penoyer Street for the placement of a shed in the Friant Street right-of-way.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, motion by Dora, second by Cummins. I see Derek is at the podium. Do you want to explain what we're doing here?
Good evening, Your Honor and fellow council. Derek Gatus, Public Works Director for the city. Yes, we had an encroachment permit that was applied for by the residents at 1805 Penoyer for placement of a shed, a retroactive permit. Of course, that goes through the city manager's office. Excuse me, for approval, and because of there's some conversation on this, it comes to you for a vote. So in our memos, both myself and the Community Development Manager Jen Howland, who couldn't be here tonight, spoke of our positions regarding to the permit. That we didn't see any, Public Works, we didn't see any outstanding reasons that it needed to be there, and that Jen followed up with some zoning requirements or issues along with allowing it there as well. So with that said, if you have any questions for me, or the Schultzes are here to, if they'd like to speak, or you can ask them questions regarding the request.
Would you like to address council?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, thank you. My biggest concern is when we bought this house 3 years ago and we moved in, there was sheds there, and so we didn't add any sheds. One of them we tore down because it was rotting and it was going bad, so we got rid of that. And then we applied to see if we could have a garage on the property. And due to the zoning of it, I was not allowed to build a garage or any type of structure detached or attached to the house. And so What we ended up doing is we expanded our deck, and so we got a permit and expanded our deck and made a carport underneath the deck so that we could park our cars there. And so we had to move the shed out of where it was sitting by the deck to expand the deck, and so we moved it over to the side by the telephone pole. There's a guide wire and a power pole, I should say, telephone power pole. So we put it, figuring that would be out of the way, nobody can park there anyway, so we put it there, and it's been fine for 3 years, and nobody's had an issue. We haven't had any snow plowing issues because it's off the road about 4 or more feet. So it's not been a problem, but it's a place where we store our lawnmower to take care of the public property as well as our property. And we've spent numerous hours and a lot of effort to make that place really nice. And so it's kind of disheartening as a homeowner, because what I'm hearing now is the zoning, the way it's predicted, our lot, as you can see it goes at a big V. So I can't place the shed anywhere in the waterfront property, which is the back or the front of the house, if you want to call it that, because of the zoning ordinances. I can't place it on the sides because I don't have enough room, because it's got to be 20 foot off the property line. I can't put it in front because there's no room. It's not 20 foot off the property line. So I'm kind of like at a point where either it stays where it's at, or I got to get rid of the shed and I have no place to put my lawnmowers, my snow blowers, my rakes, my garden equipment. The shed's not big. It's 8 by 8. It's a little Tykes plastic shed, basically. So it's not like it's unobtrusive. It's not gone bad. It's not an eyesore. So I guess I'd like the variance or the encroachment permit to be considered for this particular location, because we don't have anywhere else we can put it. So that's pretty much it.
Have you spoken with Jennifer Howland about possibly seeking a zoning variance?
No, I haven't gone that far. I was told by Derek that we should look for this encroachment permit, and so I paid the fee and got the permit, and that's what I've done.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the thing about an encroachment permit is it could be revoked at any time for no reason. If we
Right.
if we felt that things in the right-of-way needed to not be in the right-of-way, we could say.
Right.
Whereas if
And,
you had,
and again, it's not a permanent structure. It's a plastic shed sitting on a couple of blocks, so it's not, there's no foundation, there's no, it's not like it can't be moved. But
is it on a concrete pad?
no, it's on patio blocks around the corners. So it's not like it can't be moved, but I don't know where else to put it.
Okay. Questions or comments?
I did have a couple of things for Your Honor to follow up with Eric. Yeah,
Okay.
when he asked for the solution to this, a lot of times we offer that idea of an encroachment permit. It's used around the city for various reasons when you come across these. And during that encroachment permit process is when everybody looks at it, all the department heads, and that's when Jen said, well, actually, there's more issues with that. She did bring up, at least to me, and I haven't conveyed that yet to them, about maybe a zoning, a zoning variance on that. So it's a potential, another avenue, but this is the first avenue we went down.
I mean,
Just to clarify that.
Okay, but this could, even if granted, it could be a very temporary thing.
Sure.
Whereas the variance is forever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Derek, as far as you're concerned, you don't have a problem with it there?
Well, there's no, normally the encroachment permits are, because there isn't another way to do it. We have steps coming out of dunes that encroach into the right of way. We have signs that hang over the right of way, down Washington. There's no way down. Either you don't have a sign or you don't have steps. In this case, there's land on his property, and it was just simply placed in the road right of way. My fear would be that other people would come forth and want to put other infrastructure or other private property within the road right of way, that we would maybe set precedents, if you will. So maybe going for a zoning variance first, see if that would be allowed, might be another avenue before an encroachment permit could be decided on. Now that's could be up to council here to tonight, maybe direct that.
I mean, it's not interfering with the plowing, it's not interfering with anything you guys are doing down there.
Nope, not at this time.
Okay, all right, okay.
Anything else?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely correct, Derek, is that if we allow something someplace and then we have to do it again someplace else, it keeps going. It could explode into a bigger thing than we have. And the best option for them to do would be go for a variance on it before we came here to ask us for an encroachment permit. I think the variance would have been a much more smarter move. Instead of coming here for an encroachment right away, use this as the last option instead of coming here right now using it for the first option. I think a variance from the zoning would be much more appropriate. That way they can have it permanently. They don't have to worry about it being moved, or future councils decide that they don't want it there, they can tell them to leave it, to make it go. I mean, if you get a zoning variance, it's there for him forever. He can keep it right there. And if they have the room on your property, let's make sure they can do it then. That's all we can do. That's what we have those options, those tools for.
Maybe you don't know, Derek, if they withdraw this tonight and go for a zoning variance, do they then lose the money that they paid?
It wouldn't be my opinion that they would lose that. We would, if they'd come back, I would consider it paid.
I'm fine with them doing that as long as they're not gonna be out the money that they've paid.
Absolutely. I agree. We should give them that option first.
I lived in the area my whole entire life. It is the oddest little piece of property you will ever find on the waterfront with a home on it. I'm just up the street from them. I've talked to them several times. And with the setbacks that are required and the zoning that we have for that, there is almost nothing left other than a front yard. So I understand completely what you're saying. I've been there. There's really no place else that you can go with it based upon the zoning that we have. So we're either going to have to let you keep it there or give you a variance one way or the other. So I guess if you can get a zoning variance and that allows you to have it there for ever, I would pursue that option first, and then as a last option, I guess, come back here for your other requests for your encroachment permit.
Maybe as an alternative, we could start the process, the encroachment permit review process again. All of you see those as I forward that on to the city manager's office for review.
Yeah, I think, requesting the zoning Board of Appeal, or going to the zoning Board of Appeals for a variance probably makes better sense. I don't want him to get hit with a fee for them too, I'd rather, they're advised by us to, apply for this, and this is the fee, let's apply that fee towards, the ZBA request and just let it, if we have to waive, if they come back later for a encroachment permit, then, so be it, I think, at this point, but we talk about a shed here, I want to nickel and dime these folks as they're going through this process here, so.
Absolutely.
But, we also have, an ordinance that we have to follow, and I understand the precedent concern that you've raised, and I think that our ZBA process is exactly there for unique circumstances, a number of criteria that you'd have to meet, and it's up to our zoning Board of Appeals. We, as a council, have no say in that whatsoever. That's a separate board, and that's why they're separate, that gets to make that decision, so I think that seems like an appropriate route.
Well, it seems like the most permanent way to solve the problem. Zoning has made more than half of their land area not usable for this sort of thing. And that's something that they would still have to meet the 7 tests of practical difficulty at the ZBA, which can be arduous, but they might make those. Failing that, then I would think the encroachment permit would make sense. Whether we simply postpone action on this and ask that they pursue the variance process, that's a possibility. We could just, I don't know, it's already on the floor here as a item of discussion, so that's probably the most appropriate thing, but I would think a variance request would be one of those steps that hasn't been pursued yet that would be a final answer if granted. If not granted, then there's this. Because, certainly any other property or virtually any other property, we would say, go use your property. And we don't want to set a precedent, but I don't know how many other properties are going to be like this. This may be very unique, in which case you've not set a precedent at all, because your test here has been, we've taken away your other choices with zoning, therefore there's this. And I don't know that you're going to have a lot of other people coming forward with a similar situation. In fact, I think you'd have very few. So that would be my thought, is that we postpone action on this and ask them to go through the variance process. If it fails, then we put this back on our agenda, vote on it. If it succeeds, then this goes away. Then they won't need an encroachment permit.
I think that's a good idea. I like that idea. I was in favor of you doing it, but again, that would be just a temporary solution. If another council or somebody wanted you to move it, or some of your neighbors had a fit about it or something, they could cause trouble. So it's probably the easiest way is to do what Bob said, the zoning change, and see if we could do it that way, and postpone it for now, and just go ahead and see if you can do it. If you can't, it's still on our table. We can bring it forward, and we can still grant it for you if you fail to get that for some reason. But like Bob said, you don't have much of a choice where to put that thing, really. I mean, I don't, you're in a hard spot right there, and I appreciate what you're going through. So, but I think that the zoning change would be a more permanent solution for you guys. So I'd like to make a motion to postpone it.
Support.
Postpone pending the outcome of a variance request?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, postpone for a reason.
Yep.
So to Mr. Schultz, Mr. and Mrs. Schultz, you understand what we're suggesting?
That we file a
That you request a variance, and if that's...
Our money that we paid the $260 towards this, whatever this costs for that permit?
Well, that didn't... Yeah, we didn't really speak to that.
Well, I did.
Okay, well, I guess there's a cost for a variance and a cost for the encroachment permit, and if the variance were granted, I think that'd be the cost you'd pay, but I don't know.
What I thought I heard, and maybe we just heard different things, and it's good that we clear it up, so we're all hearing the same thing. I thought you were saying that if they have to come back later for the encroachment, we not charge them again for the encroachment permit, but the zoning variance would be a separate issue that he could go apply for that. Or did you want us to apply what he paid for the encroachment permit toward the variance?
That's my preference.
That was my understanding.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that makes sense as well, but I heard it the way you did. I heard, let's not charge them twice for encroachment.
Yeah,
But,
so do we charge him again when he comes back for the next encroachment, or that's waived as well?
Right, if the variance, if the zone
I mean,
variance goes through, then I don't need to go for an encroachment, right?
correct, we can't,
Is it harder to get a zone variance, done, because that goes for all properties, correct?
no, okay, yeah, come on up. Yeah, a zoning variance request is very specific to the property.
To this particular property?
Or anyone who requests a variance is very specific to their situation. You have to prove practical difficulty under the current zoning rules.
Okay.
In other words, you've exhausted your other options to do what you need to do, and that there's no place else to do it. It's not a self-created problem. There's 7 different tests. And we don't direct what the ZBA concludes. They do their own logic, and they examine the case. And so we can't tell you how that would come out.
Okay.
But that would be a permanent solution to this problem, whereas the encroachment, if granted, might not be. But as far as what it costs, I guess we're kind of making this up as we go here, but it would seem to me that if you got the variance, and then the encroachment permit is moot at that point.
Right.
So I mean, I'd be in favor of applying that, but if that fails, then you need the encroachment permit. Now you've done both.
So I was given the direction to do the encroachment permit, and the variance was not offered, so I paid the money, and now there's a potential that I will not get that back? even though it was recommended by.
I think that I think you're not going to get that back. The question is does it pay for a variance request or does it pay for an encroachment permit?
Okay.
What's the fee for those?
Is it $250, I believe, for a zoning variance request? I'll have to look that up. And just to be clear, that he put a shed on city property. It was identified, and we said, if you want to leave the shed on city property, you have to apply for an encroachment permit. If they say no, then you can go ask for a zoning variance to put it back where it originally was. Do you have those other pictures, Ashley, so we can see? I want to be real clear about this. So there's where the shed was, at the end of that
That
dock
was the
there.
old shed.
That's
that
the
we
shed he tore down.
Yep.
And so, and that property line is maybe off by a few feet, we're not sure, it's not exact. And then where the new shed is, you can see where it is right up next to the asphalt, so you see where the old shed was. So if you gave him the encroachment permit, he's well onto city property there. If he gets the variance request, he would be back over by the dock, he'd be off your property on his own lot. So I just want to make sure you understood that difference, where the shed was, where it is now.
There is one codicil with that, though, and Jennifer had pointed this out, that if we put it back by the dock, it's now in the flood zone, and we knew that from our permits for our driveway and our deck. I went to the FEMA flood zone, I went to the sensitive overlay people, I got all approval for our driveway and our deck, and we moved the shed out of and we got rid of the old shed that was in the flood zone that was not compliant. And so then we moved this shed that was sitting like on where our driveway was, and we moved it off to the side of the yard, right by the telephone pole.
So even if zoning permitted you to put it back where it was, you moved it to get out of the flood zone?
I can't, now I gotta get, I'm putting it in a flood zone, and so that wouldn't be the proper place for it. I mean, I don't want it to be underwater someday,
Yeah, so what is being discussed now is a little bit confounding, because you're saying go to apply to the ZBA for a permit to put it back on your own property.
He can apply, for zoning board of appeals case for anywhere on his property that he thinks makes sense and needs a variance for. He doesn't have to
Don't wanna
request it
put
to
it in the middle of
exactly
my
the same
yard.
spot.
Or in my
I've heard
front
plenty of
yard.
cases where
For me to put the shed in the middle of my yard it would not look good, it would not make sense, and that's why I would like just to leave it where it's at. If it's not hurting anybody where it's at, and it's not impeding with any of the public utilities or snow plowing or doing anything, what's it hurting? That's my question. It's out of the flood zone, it's out of the way, and it's not technically owned by me, but I didn't know this.
The flood zone piece, that's kind of significant because that has nothing to do with zoning.
Right. Well, she said that I would have to go to FEMA and also to,
So even if the variance are granted, you have another problem to solve.
Who's
Which
she?
the
Who
encroachment kinda
told her
gets rid
that
of.
she had to go to FEMA?
and sensitive overlay people?
Because I don't think this came for a permit for a sensitive overlay district to the city.
No,
Okay.
I had to go get approval when I was doing my other stuff, so.
Oh, okay.
I
The
mean-
other stuff, not the shed, so, okay.
I just want to, I'm Barb. Thank you for letting me speak. Like Eric was saying, we moved here 3 years ago. We get so many compliments of what we've done to this place. It was basically a hole. So we've really helped bring it up, look really nice. We worked our butts off. And for this to happen just because of a little shed, it just really just like, wow, people, we're not in anybody's way. We are by a telephone pole. You can't park there. You can't do anything there. You can't even widen the road if you wanted to widen the road because there's a telephone pole there, unless you're going to take that down and put all
Underground.
underground.
Yeah.
We worked our butts off, and it just really upsets me to it's a stupid shed. I can't put the tools in my laundry room. It's quite a small place. We downsized big time. Nothing to do with that. But we would just really appreciate if this could just go away. Just let us have our little 8x8 shed where it goes.
The
Where it is.
encroachment permit, and if it lasts
it's
10 years,
so-
great. If it lasts 5 years until we have to renegotiate it again or talk about it again?
It just seems silly to us.
It's not a big building that we're erecting and putting a foundation in. It's a shed.
Okay, and like I said, I don't think that even if a variance were granted, it wouldn't cure the floodplain problem.
Right. So then we're back to the encroachment. Can
Yeah,
I
so-
encroach on public property with my little shed?
So I've changed my mind. I don't think the variance is the answer.
Thank you.
No. In reading Jennifer's letter, it pretty much says that much of the property is located within the sensitive areas overlay district because it's in a floodplain. This requires an additional administrative review, and it may also require approval from the state of Michigan, Eagle. The above zoning analysis would demonstrate that there is limited space on the property for a shed without obtaining a variance. That doesn't justify the use of the city right-of-way, but it does explain that it would not be simple to just relocate the shed onto private property. So he's pretty much stuck. I mean, he's not gonna be able to move it without going through Eagle and other permits or a variance, which most likely, probably isn't gonna pass anyways, so. Judging from what it reads here from Jennifer, it almost looks like we go ahead with giving him a variance to keep it there, or he has to do away with the shed. Quite honestly, I wouldn't wanna drive by every day and look at his lawnmowers in his yard either, so.
Thank you.
Yes, Pat?
It seems that there's some hang-up about the precedent issue, which I agree with. If you do something like this near the waterfront and somebody else comes along with a similar thing and wants to put something on your property near the waterfront, and they say, well, you did it before. If you do decide to allow this encroachment tonight, they've acknowledged, they get it, they know what the encroachment reads, and someday you need to do something down there different, they get it, it's public property. So you're protected in that regard, so that's no risk. Like they said, it's not in the way of anything currently, so that's no risk. The only risk, if it's that precedential thing, we can put a very clear statement on the permit itself that calls these things out. It was a flood zone, it was the unique shape of the lot, there were no other alternatives. To place it on their property would be in an area that would be at risk, et cetera, so that we put enough points on there so we eliminate that risk of setting a precedent. If somebody else came with the exact same circumstances, you'd probably say, oh, okay, well, they've got the same problem, we've got a solution for you. So I think we might be able to have your cake and eat it too if we're very explicit and clear in the permit itself and we list those unique characteristics. It sounds very familiar to a variance. When they grant a variance, they're real deliberate about stating those things that are unique. So we would just do that on the encroachment permit so it wouldn't have that, what Mr. Fritz was worried about it being a precedent, that we could protect ourselves from that by being uber clear in that description that this is unique. And I can't think of anywhere else in town where you've got this condition. And I do want to just, so full disclosure, there has been discussion in the past about cleaning up this piece of road and putting in a kayak launch or a couple parking spots, and it's not in the budget, it's not in the rec plan, but that's, has been discussed before, because there's only a handful of dead ends in town that go right up to the water. And the one that I think of is 6th Street, where you've got a kayak launch currently, and so that kind of, it's been kicked around a little bit, and when Mike was a little guy, I think he used to drag a little scow down there and go out fishing, so you might see him sneaking through the brush. But that was just a thought, that you could approve it, and we would just be very explicit on the application itself to protect you from other people taking advantage of it.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Me too.
Anyone else?
I'm good with it. As
Okay.
long as they're very explicit on the
Okay.
reading of it.
Okay.
All right.
Very good. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Now the fee for the use of that land, right?
Well, they paid for this.
That's a joke.
They paid for this analysis.
I think the assessor's gonna look at it and that property value is gonna go right through the roof now.
That'd be our property though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we'll get the tax bill for it now.
Okay. All right, have we discussed this enough then? We know where this is going?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I
And
believe
I'll
it-
provide you all with a copy of that actual permit language. It's very rare that an encroachment permit gets this level of treatment, and I'm sure you're all grateful for that. You don't want 2 of these every meeting, because they are kind of tough, but this was a very unique and special one. And I appreciate Derek and Jennifer. They've been trying to find a way, and it sounds like you came up with a pretty good solution.
Okay. All right, then we're ready to vote.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. All right. Congratulations.
A lot of discussion, but we worked it out.
We ended up right back where we started, didn't we?
Kind of reminds me of postcards.
All right, next item.
This is to approve a resolution to accept unclaimed or found currency in the amount of $205.61 reported between 2014 and 2020 and deposit this into the city's general fund in accordance with section 28-12 of the Grand Haven Code of Ordinances.
You have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Fritz, second by Scott. Okay, Mike, you asked for this to be on our new business.
Yeah, just for conversation, I had a question about it. Everybody here is familiar with my recent encounter with a homeless couple several weeks ago, over Labor Day weekend. One of the questions that the officer asked them at the time he was talking to them is if they had had any meals. They fortunately had $27 to their name, so they had been eating. When I asked him about that, if there was a place that folks could get meals that needed one around town, he said, no, not really, but we have a fund set up at the DPS that the officers each pitch in a certain amount of money to, that they can draw money out of and buy folks a meal if they haven't had one. Which I thought that was, great. I thank DPS guys for doing that. I saw this come up on the agenda for the amount of $205.61 that Officer Boyle happened to find. So I'm inquiring as to if we can take this $205.61, and I know we're going to put it into the general fund, but if we can then turn around and take that and give it to Officer Boyle and Department of Public Safety to put into their fund, so when folks need a meal, they can buy them one and not have to pay for it out of their own pocket. It seems that as a city, we should be able to help out folks who are in need, and we should be better, and we need to be better. And if that means we have to come up with an avenue that says that we're going to have a fund that we're going to put so much in every year so that the officers don't have to contribute money out of their own pockets to buy someone a meal, then I'd be all for that as well. So that's why I asked it to be moved. I don't know what can be done or what we can work out, but it would sure seem nice that seeing Officer Boyle found $205.61, we could give it back to their fund so that they could afford to buy folks a meal if they need to. That's the conversation I wanted to have.
So this fund that you're talking about that the officers have generated, this is something they just contributed to themselves?
That's what I understand.
Okay, so it's not a fund of the city, so
No.
you'd be moving, because I think our vehicle here is that
And maybe it needs
the
to
unclaimed
be.
currency goes into general fund. Is that a matter of policy or a matter of law?
That's a local ordinance that provides that after it's 6 months, the police chief may direct a report to city council explaining what was found and how much it was, and then it goes into the general fund. And yeah, I understand your intent, and it's noble and appropriate, I'm sure, but I'd have to talk to the finance director and look at, accounting practices and principles. We'd have to find a way to make that real. It gets a little touchy, because we just can't take public money and put it towards a fund to buy meals for people as they see fit, but we could probably find a way to work that out in a separate forum. But, this is strictly a matter of law. There's an ordinance that says when there's found money, and they gave me some examples, like maybe a change purse, which sounds like a bygone era, but some people actually have them. And they find one without an ID in it, well, we hold on to it for 6 months, and then it becomes subject to this. And it's been a long time. I mean, I don't know, Mike, you've been on council an awful long time. I don't ever remember, it's been a long time since this came up. I think it's been some years.
It's been some years since we've done this, but we've had it done a couple of times since I've been
Okay,
on here.
Okay, so maybe every 3 or 4 years, they come up with $200. So, yeah, we can look into that and see if there's a way we could amend the ordinance or look at the general accounting practices. I can't make out Amy's face from here. She's got a mask on, so I don't know if she's frowning or smiling, but we can look into that, Mike, and get you some information on how we can do that, or if we can do
That'd be
it.
great, Pat, even if it was some type of venue that we could come up with, or a fund that we have to create, I don't care. There just needs to be something for the officers to be able to use at their discretion, other than a pot of money that they have, that they've each contributed $20 or $40 to every other paycheck to buy somebody a meal.
Okay.
Other than that, I'll approve putting it in the general fund.
Okay, and I think that's our choice.
I know,
Okay, but I appreciate the,
but I wanted the conversation.
no, it's a great conversation. It's, well-intended and, just need to have a mechanism to do that. Okay, any other discussion? Ready to vote?
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. Which brings us to our report by city council. Who would like to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
As most of you know, I've been a little under the weather the last couple weeks, which they weren't quite sure was the flu, COVID, ends up being an allergic reaction to a blood pressure medicine. Who would have ever thought? I'll tell you what, it was a tough week. I didn't get out and do a whole lot of stuff, but I did get out and attend the BLP 125th anniversary celebration, which I was surprised. I thought there'd be a few more people than what were there, but it was attended, and congratulate them on 125 years of providing power to the city of Grand Haven. There is open house at the diesel plant coming up on Wednesday and Thursday from 3 to 6, and I encourage people to attend that as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was also there. It wasn't well attended, but there was a few people there. It was good that we recognized the Board of Light and Power for 125 years. It was good. It was a great time. So yeah, it was good. One other thing, talking about the musical fountain, it reminded me my dad worked on the musical fountain when they were building it, and I remember him worked for the city at the time. They were hauling pipe up there, and he was telling me all. I remember the stories going how the pipe went down there and how they were hauling it up the hill, and it was pretty unique how they used to do that. And like I said, he worked for the city, did it, and then also he volunteered time to do the same thing. So, but it was good. And then when it got done, it was known as the world's largest musical fountain. And I remember going there as a kid and watching the first time it was on there, and it was pretty cool. But it's changed a lot since then, and it's a lot nicer now than it was then. The lights have changed, and it's really cool now. But it was a big deal when the thing was done for the first time, and I just remember that time, and it was cool. That's all.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, it was, Denny. Brings back a lot of memories for me. I attended the Hispanic Heritage Fiesta, and I tell you what, that was a fantastic time. It was so nice to see our town being so vibrant and being so diverse. I could not believe all the people that were in town. If you go down to downtown, you see people with bags that were normally not in Grand Haven. A lot of them came from Muskegon, came from Holland, Grand Rapids. They come from all over here. It was nice to have that here in Grand Haven. I got to say thank you to the organization that did this, because it was well attended. I went down to their concert they had on Friday night, which was a free concert, and they actually had to have they had alcohol, they had wristbands, and it was very, very well attended. I could not believe the amount of people, and the band they had was fantastic. I mean, it was unbelievable. I'm not really versed in Spanish so much, but I understand music, and music is always to the soul and the heart. And it was very good, so it was nice to see everybody coming together. It was what you like to see in your community, so thank you to them for that very much. Other than that, of course I went to the 125th, and you're right, I was hoping to see a lot more people out there, and as much attention as the BLP has had. I'm very disappointed that a lot of them didn't show up. They were very vocal on the BLP. I thought they'd come out at least and celebrate 125 years of having our own power, you know, but it's another thing, like, who knows where it's gonna be in another 15, 20 years. We don't no longer own our water plant, we no longer own our sewer plant, it's all authorities. We're just losing our own identity, is what we say. If you're old in that, you know that this town wanted to be very decisive on it. They wanted to have their own independence. They didn't want to rely on outside sources. So we got to be very careful that our BLP sticks around here, and it actually is here in Grand Haven what we do. We don't even have we started out with a harbor system, harbor transit system. Now it's an authority. We used to own a library. Now it's an authority. It just keeps rolling on and on and on. I can make a whole list of things that we don't have no more, that we're just a part of. And we need to be, like our forefathers said, that we like to be independent and make sure that we take care of things here for us. We gotta make sure we take care of our citizens, and that's what we wanna do. We don't wanna rely on outside sources, so make sure we watch that BLP and make sure we hang on to it. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I attended the Michigan Municipal League Conference in Grand Rapids. So that was, learned some really good things, met a lot of great people, but there were some really great sessions that kind of gave me some good energy. Was able to bring back some ideas, some things I'm still thinking through. Got to know Mr. Fritz here a lot better. You know, we've had the pandemic, we're meeting on Zoom so much, and you get a chance to always, you know, talk one-on-one. So we had a lot of opportunities to do that. So that was a enjoyable conference. And I don't know if you guys have seen our neighbors to the north in Muskegon will actually be hosting next year. So we won't have too far to travel at all next year. So that's kind of neat. I also attended the BLP's 125-year celebration, and it is a significant milestone, I think, for our community. And ironically, that very same day, they had a significant outage that they had to repair. And then talking with the general manager, Dave Walters, he indicated that was the largest that he's had since he's been here, that they had to. But because we have a local utility that is focused on our distribution lines, they were able to respond quickly, get things rerouted quickly, get our hospital back online very quickly, and then have everything back up and running within a matter of hours versus maybe some of the other service that you might get from some other utilities. And so we are lucky to have our Board of Light and Power focus on local distribution. They're going to be making a lot of investments and upgrades to our distribution systems and getting us the best deals on our power and capacity as we go forward. And so I hope for many more years from them as well. I mean, if we're not, generating power as we have for many years. Zach, I want to give you kudos. I've seen Ottawa County's done this before, but you're bringing the brown bag lunches to the city of Grand Haven. I think that's kind of a fantastic idea, a good opportunity for staff of all levels to get together and provide, their thoughts, feedback, frustrations, even with the city council, honestly. I mean, whatever it is, bring it back to us. We really want to know what our staff at all levels are thinking, and I hope they take advantage of those and an opportunity for some lunch. And the last piece I just want to leave on is, many of you probably saw, but Grand Haven was one of the, was listed in the top 10 on the USA Today magazine for places to visit this fall for families, which is a very significant, pretty special thing, I think, for all the places around the country that could have been chosen. Grand Haven here was chosen as the spot to visit this fall, and so I think it speaks to it. It's really interesting. I've seen on different things on social media, and I definitely believe that we still have to be innovative and adapt and continue to reinvigorate our town as we go and continue that momentum and that energy. But some people say, "Oh, there's nothing to do here in Grand Haven." It's shocking to me when I hear that. And maybe we have some more work to do. But Mary Ellen Murphy from 92.1 WGHN, one of our local radio stations here, mentioned she actually had a piece in the Tribune that talked about exactly that, like how many things there really are to do here in Grand Haven, here in the Tri-Cities, here locally from, not just restaurants and dining, but, just to the natural beauty that we have. And she talked about how so much of it is free. I mean, a musical fountain, there's a cost to it, as we've talked about tonight, but, we're not charging people to go to those things. We're not charging people to walk on our boardwalk. And so, that was really, I think, a good piece. I reached out to her on that, but I thought that was, really, hit it home. And, we just need to continue to be good ambassadors for the community. And, hey, welcome new ideas as they come, too. We want to remain competitive and a great place to visit. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Ryan. Great observations. And I attended many of the same events as everyone else, and Fiesta was great. I was at the MML convention, BLP birthday party. All those were great events and good recognition. I did want to point out that this week we're doing diesel plant tours to the public. So Wednesday, Thursday, 3 to 6 p.m., come on out and see the diesel plant. Get a chance to walk through it before anything else is done to it. You can see the big old engines that are in there. And what a storing space that is. It's really a majestic space if you can imagine it without the machines. Or if you're an engineer like I am, even with the machines, it's pretty great. And Wednesday we're having a business recognition luncheon, which is something that we weren't able to do last year. So last year's recipient was Outside Ales, and they got their award and their tribute and all that, but they couldn't have a luncheon for them. This year we're going to revisit that and re-recognize them, and then this year's recipient will be Blizzard Brewing over on the other side of town. So we kind of bookended Washington Avenue with custom brewing places that are our businesses of the year, but they're bringing tremendous vitality, tremendous excitement to that end of town, which is something that's great to have. So glad to be able to recognize them. And that's all I've got. So turn it over to Pat for city manager report.
Thank you, Honor. That hadn't occurred to me that I knew you gave it to two breweries 2 years in a row, but one's at one end of Washington, the other's at the exact opposite end of Washington.
And I live right in the middle.
Yeah, we need one right on US 31, I guess. But thank you. I did just, the one thing I had on here with the surplus trolley report that I gave you. Harbor Transit's had trolleys for a long time. We got a couple trolleys back late 80s. Don't put it out, you're stealing my thunder. Not yet. Okay. So we had two trolleys way back when. We used those for a very long time, and then came to a point where we got two new trolleys a little later in the 90s. Those two old trolleys we ended up converting into a charter service, and that was a long story in and of itself. Harbor Transit, being a federally funded agency, was not able to do those weddings and those retirement parties and the bachelorette parties that you see. And those are kind of charming when you see a wedding party on the back of one of those trolleys and it's going down to the beach and they're taking pictures. It's a lot of fun. So people were very disappointed when we had a couple years there where Harbor Transit could not do those charters. So the city wound up stepping up and taking ownership of those, and we ran it as our own department for a while. Well, then that stopped happening, and then Harbor Transit picked it back up, but we set up a separate LLC at Harbor Transit to run it. And that ran its course, and Harbor Transit divorced them again, and we took them back again, and we've been running it now for some months. Well, the two trolleys that we were running became unroadworthy. The MDOT inspector came and looked at them and said, can't use them anymore on the road. Meanwhile, Harbor Transit's ordered two new trolleys. Those are being delivered as we speak. Any day now, those will be out on the road. So we will have two brand new trolleys running the Harbor Transit trolley routes as part of the Harbor Transit federally funded operation. And they do a lot of rides in the summertime, very tourist oriented. Still can't do the charters, so we're going to try to pick up those two middle-aged trolleys, I guess, and try to convert those into a charter system that the city can run. And we get it going at a break even is our goal. If we can make it break even, we think we've succeeded in maintaining that service, because people like to use those trolleys. We like to make it affordable. We're happy if they can get Muskegon Trolley, which, by the way, the MATS system is an LLC run by MATS. So that's where we got that idea to spin it off. So you can rent that trolley. There is one in Grand Rapids, but the cost of it makes it pretty rare that it makes an appearance here in Grand Haven. But when we can run our trolleys right here in Grand Haven and the affordability of it, you see them most weekends during the summer when we're healthy. So we're hoping to get those two middle trolleys for charters. But what about those two really old trolleys that are no longer roadworthy? Well, we were ready to put them out to pasture, we go to Ranger bid. That's the name of that independent service that we put all our equipment through, and we're done with it. We wash our hands. We don't have to do the costly RFP process or auction process. It gets to be pretty intense. But what occurred to me, and now you can hit the photos, is there are some of these trolleys around that are food truck trolleys. We've got the Righteous Cuisine one is up top there. That's a converted trolley, and then Ryan sent me the picture of the, is it a pizza cone?
Pizza cone trolley.
Yep. Is that in Muskegon, or?
He's in Muskegon, but that picture is actually in Grand Haven.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I guess it's a cone of pizza. I've not had one, so I'm not. But we need that, obviously. So the idea would be that we make these trolleys available for local businesses, because one of your goals set for this year was to do what we can to help local business, to help small business. And I think it would be a great benefit to small business if they didn't have to go through that Ranger bid process, which boosts the price up. We don't think we're going to get much more than, $1,500, $2,000 for both of them. These things are really spent. But somebody might be able to restore them enough to be able to run a food truck out of them. We'll let them be the judge. But I wanted to come to you and see if you thought that was a good idea, that we could get some interest stirred up among our local business community, and see if there are a couple, they may be startup businesses, that could be an incubator type process, or it could be an existing business that we have that's thought about a food truck but hasn't been able to come up with the capital to purchase something. We could take proposals and see if they want to bid some money. Maybe Amy can find us a way to convert that into money for meals for the homeless. I don't know, we can look into that. But I thought it was worth a stab, rather than just stick them out to Ranger bid and they disappear and they go away forever. And there's some benefit to making them available to local businesses. There's been some resistance from our bricks and mortars businesses to have mobile food trucks coming in and selling food. Well, if we open up this opportunity, maybe they decide they want to get into the business and have a food truck. So just kind of wanted to get a read from you before we maybe get kind of an experimental effort, just see what we get back.
The old saying is, nothing ventured, nothing gained, so I'm worth to try something, as long as it's local,
Maybe we could tell them what they can bid are vouchers that our public safety can have to give to people who need a meal, and they can go get a pizza cone. Might not be the healthiest option for them. Not that pizza cones aren't healthy. I'm not disparaging that food. I'm sure they have vegetable ones. So if that's all right, I'll plan on just kind of moving along there. And anything we do, we'll end up bringing to City Council for approval, and I'll have to work with Amy on the finance end of it. And and then the other thing I wanted to talk about before we break up tonight is direction on the city clerk selection process. I don't know if you've already formed some ideas or opinions, if you wanted to talk about it now, or if you wanted me to put something on your next agenda, which would be October 18th. In the meantime, you can individually reach out to the mayor, myself, share your thoughts, and possibly get us in a position to either have an appointment on your next agenda or have direction to keep the process open.
Yeah, and I would encourage us to try to resolve this at our next meeting if we're ready. So if you would, each of you communicate either with me or with Pat or both. And if there's a consensus, this will be something we would vote on whenever it comes on our agenda for an agreement. But I think that would be one way to get to a point where we have a resolution on our agenda.
And I will work with Zachary to talk about if in the case of the clerk, it's an actual direct appointment by city council. Mm-hmm. So that would be the measure. And if we have time, we may be able to pre-negotiate terms and have that ready for you as well. If not, you do the appointment, then we go and negotiate. And we still need to, if you've got a preferred candidate, we still have to do the reference checks and go through a number of mechanical things with the process, but we'll keep it moving. So share your thoughts and possibly something on the October 18th agenda.
Okay. And as far as the trolleys turned to food trucks or whatever they become, as long as they're sold as is and cost the city nothing, I don't know that we care if we really get much out of the asset. They don't have a lot of asset value, but if they can be turned into something productive for the community and not cost us anything or have any further obligation, then I'm fine with it.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I'm good too.
I told Pat I supported it already.
All right.
Fine with me.
All right. That brings us to our second call to the audience. So this is our second opportunity for anybody in the audience. Come forward and address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Give us your name, address, you have 3 minutes of speaking time, and we will hear all comments tonight. So if anybody would like to come forward, now's your last chance. I see no big rush to the microphone. So on that note, unless there's something else somebody would like to bring up at the last minute, I will declare us adjourned.
Adjourned.
Thank you for coming.
Man, Ryan.